Good evening and welcome to Transition Talks Tuesdays. This is the spring/winter, if spring ever comes, 2025 edition in partnership with Mount Horeb Area School District Transition Team. Really excited to be able to partner with Mount Horeb on Transition Talks Tuesdays as we came up with the topics together and some of the speakers. And so tonight we're going to be starting with housing options. We're going to have a couple of people talk about what they know about options for housing after people with disabilities turn 18. We'll hear words like adult family homes, supports to move out on your own, end up with a resource sheet about who to contact if you want to learn more. And so I'm really excited for this discussion tonight. I will let you know that housing is not an area that I consider to be in my wheelhouse. It is definitely something that I am learning more and more about as I interact with more and more families, and the options are changing as well. And so let's start with Karen. Karen's with an organization called Movin Out, which, by the way, one of the best names. I mean, we're going to talk to Marianne, whose acronym is WHO. It doesn't get much better than that either. But let's start with Moving Out. What a great name. Karen, can you tell us a little bit about Moving Out and what you know about this whole housing in Wisconsin?
Sure, absolutely. So I can tell you that moving out was started by a group of parents, much like I imagine the parents here, who were thinking about, the future for their children as they aged out of the school districts and how they might be able to move into housing on their own. And so they came together and brainstormed some ideas and looked into various funding options and started with our core program, which is our housing counseling and homeownership assistance program. And I'll get into that in a little bit. We also then branched out into multifamily developments, which include units that are set aside for folks living with disabilities. We have some scattered site properties that we've acquired and rehabbed over time to provide additional rental opportunities for folks. And then we also are now starting up trying to create a statewide fund for home improvements and accessibility modifications to allow people to make those changes to make either to move in or to remain in their home as their disabilities progress. And so what Moving Out has done over the past 30 years is try to provide families that include a member with a disability or folks who are living on their own with a disability, a suite of options to allow them to live in the community and then be as integrated as they want to be into their local community, but then also be able to access as much support as they might need while they're living on their own. So we have units that have been modified to allow for a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week carer to reside with the individual renting. We have units that are much more focused on the individual themselves, and they have somebody coming in and visiting with them, but they don't have someone living there all the time. We're trying to make our units as modifiable as possible so that as people move in and out of these units, we can adjust them to the needs of the incoming tenant. And so we now have, I think it's roughly 20 multifamily developments all across the state of Wisconsin that we have worked in partnership with local developers who are accessing low-income housing tax credits, which allow them to be able to build affordable housing and then get some subsidies from the government so that it's financially viable at those low rental rates. And in each of those developments, we manage a subset of the units that have been set aside for folks living with disabilities. That's one part of what we do. We also, again, like I said, have these scattered site properties, which we've either acquired or they've been gifted to us. Usually they're single family homes. There's a few duplexes that, again, are available for rent and are able to be modified as needed for the people who are currently residing in those units. Then the core of our program that sort of started Moving Out is our housing counseling and homeownership. And what we do here is we have a team of housing counselors who've gone through pretty rigorous training to HUD standards to provide one-on-one financial and housing counseling to our clients who are looking for housing options. And this can be anything from, helping them set up a budget and figure out how much they're going to need to save, to connecting them with a realtor that can help them look for property, and then helping them identify a potential lender, sort of running the gamut based on what that individual's housing goals are that they've set for themselves. And as part of that, we administer a number of different programs that offer down payment assistance to the individuals looking to purchase a home. This allows them to reduce the price of the property overall, meaning that they can take out a smaller loan and then are able to afford something that they can move into and be safe and have it be accessible for them in terms of their financial situation. Obviously, a lot of the people that we're working with are on SSDI, and so their income is limited. And so these programs really help make housing, purchasing a house, a reality for a lot of people that it might otherwise be out of their reach. Some of these programs are state programs. We have partnerships with the state of Wisconsin to run some of these down payment assistance programs. There are quite a number of local municipalities, counties and cities that have their own programs that we work with. And then there's some private entities that have down payment assistance programs that are available to our clients. So what our role really is to be that sort of guide through the process of purchasing a home, answering questions, helping people make connections, helping them understand the financial ramifications. If they get benefits of any kind, is taking out a loan going to impact their benefits, and helping them make those adjustments as they need to be able to be financially stable once they do move into their home. I'd say that the majority of the people that we work with to purchase homes are families, and usually they may be 2 or 3 generations living together, and the families would include one or more individuals who are living with a disability. We do occasionally work with single people, but they're not usually looking to buy a home. They're usually looking to rent, and then maybe down the road make a home purchase. So in a nutshell, what we're trying to do is give people a suite of options, help them think through what they might want to be looking for in terms of their housing goals. And once they've identified those, help them identify what kind of funding resources and other assistance might be available to them to achieve those goals. It's, I think, been a tremendously successful program. I want to say we've put about 2,000 people into their first homes over the 30 years. And of those, a tiny, minuscule amount have then had to move out for one reason or another, or have been foreclosed on. The stability of life after purchasing these homes for these people has just been phenomenal. And that's part of our counseling goal, is not just to get you in the home, but to make sure that you can stay there and manage and be self-sufficient and sustainable in the home. Again, we're starting up this new program where we're trying to provide funding for rehabilitation work to homes. We're finding that in the current market, you might all be aware that it's a pretty tight housing market right now. And in the current market, the homes that are available that are within the price range of the people that we're working with can often come with some renovation needs. They need new paint, they might need a new roof, and then trying to budget that in along with the mortgage that they're taking out makes it a little bit of a stretch for people. So we're hoping to pair up these down payment assistance programs with this rehab assistance fund that can help them make those improvements to the home to make it safe to live in from the get-go. Most of the programs are set up as deferred 0% interest loans, meaning there's no need to pay them back while you live in the house. You pay them back if you move or sell. And so if you're no longer residing in the home as your primary residence, that would be the time at which you'd need to make repayment on the loan. But over those years that you've lived there, there's no interest accruing. You're just paying out the amount that was paid in at the purchase at the point of purchase. So these are really accessible programs for folks. The benefit of having it be a loan program means that those funds that are paid back then go back into the system and can help new clients acquire homes. So it's a nice sort of rolling fund that can be made available to people over many, many years. That was a really brief overview of what we do. I thought I'd let people, if there's any questions or you want to delve into any of this in more detail, I'm happy to take those questions. But I would also point you to our website. We offer a online home buyer education course on our website that people can take that sort of gives them a sense of how ready am I to move into home ownership, and then give them a little introduction to the steps involved in becoming a homeowner. That's available on our website if you want to go there and take a look at that and use that as a guide for assessing if homeownership is the right step for you. But again, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, so feel free to think of questions. You could unmute. I'll be able to see that on my screens, or you can put your questions in the chat, and I'll be able to ask them. I know that some of the families that we're talking to are looking more at those 18-year-olds, 18 to 21-year-olds that are looking to possibly move out of the house for the first time, and so probably not buying the home, the fantastic program there. But I do know that you work with some rental properties.
Absolutely.
As well as apartments. And so I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that and then
Yep.
about the different ways that you have seen people be able to fund that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the rental properties that we manage, again, they're in developments that are built using those low-income housing tax credits, which means that rents cannot rise above a certain percentage of an individual's income. And so the rents are kept low through that mechanism, lower than obviously any sort of surrounding properties might be. And many of our tenants do then additionally tap into funds like the 811 fund, which allows payments to be made on behalf of somebody who has a disability and is on Social Security with a limited income. The 811 fund will match what they can pay in their rent. We also have some Section 8 units that use Section 8 funds. So there's a number of different mechanisms that we can work with people as they're looking for a unit to help find funding sources that are going to make it viable for them to be able to move in. The unfortunate part of this is that the demand for this kind of housing is, as you might imagine, very, very steep. And so many of our properties in the Madison area and the Milwaukee area have waiting lists for those available units. Some of our further afield properties, we have one in Platteville, we've got one in Baraboo, Wisconsin Dells. Those have more openings and are you're going to be able to find a unit there much faster than you would in the larger metro areas. One of the, I think, visions that we have is that the people that we move into those units, as they stay there and become more stable in their finances and their living situations, we then provide them with additional supports, like bringing in people who can talk to them about developing a budget and savings plan and helping them improve their credit score, or helping them access online learning so that they can maybe reach out into some very different employment opportunities that they might not have had. So we do provide what we call empowerment services for the folks living in these units that we try to speak with the people living in the units and say, what would you like? What would be the most important thing for you? But to help them grow in their living situation with the everyone says a goal, but with the hope that, as some of these people do move forward, they then become ready to become homeowners. And then we can take them through that process and thereby open up these units for new people to move in. So we're really looking at this as a long-term commitment to the growth and stability of the people living in these units, and helping them not just become stagnant, but continue to grow and progress and make changes in their lives. So that's another component of our rental units that we are very committed to in terms of providing these ongoing services and assistance that we try to develop in partnership with the people living there to identify what is going to be of most help for them as they reside there. So yes, we do have rental properties. Mostly, I would say, in the southern half of the state is where they're mostly located. We are trying to work on a property right now up in Rice Lake. That would be our farthest north one. But the majority of them are going to be in the sort of the southern half of the state. And again, they are units that are set aside within these larger developments. But as we work with developers to construct and design those larger units, we're looking at the whole picture of if folks with disabilities are living in these units in this larger building, we want to make sure that the whole building is accessible. So it's not just the unit that's accessible, but that every part of the building is accessible. So things like drive-up front doors with ramps, so that if they're using modified transportation, it's easy to access from the front door of the building. Having things like buzzers that you can talk and see when you're communicating with somebody outside. So I guess it's almost it makes no sense not to do that in my mind, because you're really just empowering everybody who lives there by adding these benefits. But it does allow the people who are in those units to be able to access every part of that building and every aspect of living there without impediments or obstacles. So that's another feature that we try to build in as we're constructing these developments. There's something else I was going to say about our rental, but I'm forgetting what it was.
That's okay. You can hang around, right, till
Yeah,
the hour.
yeah,
Okay, you'll hang around
yeah,
with us. So
yeah.
if you think of questions for Karen, please feel free to put them into the chat and we'll get to them. But I would also like to now just move on to Mary Ann as we move from this big picture of this big organization of moving out down to another parent started organization, Home of Our Own. So Mary Ann, if you wanted to get started, and then I'll pull up your PowerPoint.
That sounds good. Thank you, Tim. Yes, and not only were we a parent-started organization, but it was very Mount Horeb centric. So for those of you who are familiar with Mark in Mount Horeb, which provides vocational day and supportive employment or job coaching type services for people who work out in the community. So originally 4 families came together, and all 4 of us had loved ones who were supported, and most of them are still supported by Mark. And so I'll put a plug in for Mark. But that's how the group started. It was families that wanted to create an opportunity and solve a problem and provide independence for our loved ones, our sons and daughters who had never had the opportunity to be independent prior. And so I'm going to be talking about sort of a very micro aspect to this, which is what did we create? And so I'm going to be really talking about a lot of specifics. But basically this group started, I want to say 13, 14 years ago already, where we came together and we met at Sholin's in Mount Horeb every single Tuesday morning for a decade, it felt like. And we started out just talking about the general, what is it we were trying to create? What kind of environment did we know, or did our loved ones tell us they would be comfortable living in, and we went from there. And I just want to kind of preface this as saying that the original 4 families, we all represented individuals who were non-speaking or who had some speech, but not enough where they could meaningfully advocate for themselves beyond, gestures, letter boards, and sometimes by behavior, right? So we did have to make some very educated guesses, but they were, at our sides the whole time, providing input to the extent that they were able to do that. So what we did is this group, and our little acronym is WHO, thus the owl logo, is we created Prairie House Apartments in New Glarus. Just a short drive from Mount Horeb. And this is just a little cover page. Oh, you can go back, Tim, to that cover page, if you would, for just a minute. Well, okay. So in any event, you saw a photo of a young lady on a couch who is one of our most recent move-ins. She has autism. She's 19 years old. There she is. That's Ashley. And it's just a quote from her talking about her excitement being able to move into her own apartment. But the other thing that was incredibly important to all of us was not just to provide housing to the folks that we represented, but also to provide housing in an inclusive setting. So there's also a photo here of a single mom with her two boys who also lives in the apartment building. And so those were just some representative quotes. And so then we can go on to the next slide. So back one, Tim, sorry. So who began again with the family-led group. We wound up partnering with a Dane County-based affordable housing nonprofit organization to kind of align our visions and make sure we were aligned and talk to one another about priorities and what was important to us and to those that we represented. And ultimately, we came to that meeting of minds and proposed to build a $9 million building in New Glarus. And the parent-led nonprofit, was asked to raise $500,000 towards the goal of building this building. The building has now been up for 4.5 years, where folks have been living in the building, but we continue to play a role. We have an office in the building, and kind of our role currently is to sponsor and put on building-wide activities and programming, create sort of community connections with first responders, with entities that we can co-sponsor activities with. We also provide building amenities beyond those that the building owner initially outfitted the apartment building with. And we also consult with groups across the country who have kind of seen our story and said, how did you do this? We want to do something like this in our own communities. So that's kind of the nutshell of how we started. And then the next slide. All right, so here's an initial rendering of the front of Prairie House. It's a 40-unit affordable inclusive apartment building, also a LIHTC building, meaning that it was financed by low-income housing tax credits. Every family structure you can think of is represented in this building, and I estimate the age range to be from age 3 to folks in their 80s. Everybody living side by side. Tenant population, though, because we represented that group that wanted housing for those of us that we represented. We do have a number of people who have some type of disability. We've got 10 folks with autism, the majority of whom have non-speaking autism. We've got others with Rett syndrome, cerebral palsy, some brain injuries due to a farm accident, actually, cognitive, physical, and mobility challenge with the balance of the individuals living in the apartment being neurotypical. About 10 to 12 of the tenants in the building do require one-on-one 24/7 support. And I'll be talking about the support a little bit later. But others require no supports or just a little bit of support. All right, so as we were going into this process, I'm going to talk a little bit about our outdoor spaces and a little bit about our indoor spaces, because we tried to be as thoughtful as we could within the parameters of everybody's limitations, financial and otherwise, but we tried to be thoughtful about our outdoor spaces. And so representing as many people with autism as we did, we knew that meeting people's sensory needs was going to be very important. And for many folks, that means swings, but not exclusively swings. So we have 2 different sets of outdoor swings. But in addition to that, we've got raised garden beds so people can come out and in the evening and water gardens and plant their veggies, and with an emphasis then on healthy eating, but also community. The swings are both recreational and needed for regulation. We've got multiple patios. We've got a rooftop deck, an area with the basketball hoops and outdoor toys and chalk art, picnic tables, patio furniture. And we're within walking distance to the Sugar River Bike and Walking Trail, and also within walking distance to just about anything in town, including um, um, the grocery store. All right, so here's a drone or aerial view of the building from the other side. The one-story areas are where our community spaces are located, but there's community spaces in the other part of the building as well. Indoor spaces. So part of our vision and mission is to create that community and to bring people together from all walks of life. And so we utilize the indoor spaces to create opportunities for socialization, try to get people out of their apartments, interacting with one another. We've got 2 community kitchens, puzzle and game tables, a little free library, a TV gaming system. We have a tenant-initiated food pantry in the building. We've got some cozy reading nooks, a fireplace seating, indoor swings or gliders, and what was really important to the building owner was to have what they call culturally sensitive artwork. So a third of the artwork is kind of Greene County centric, Driftless centric. A third is artwork by people with disabilities, and a third is actual original pieces from local artists. One of the things that we were really big on is knowing that often the IDDD population can be quite sedentary, especially after high school. And so we wanted to create an indoor walking loop. And so it's unique to, it's one of the reasons why the design looks the way it does, but we have folks who regularly walk, both with disabilities and especially some of the older folks during January. They don't want to be out in the ice and the snow, but they're able to walk laps or loops within the building, and it's heavily used. We've got an on-site salon where we've got a visiting stylist who comes in once every 8 weeks. That's been wonderful for people in wheelchairs and mobility challenges. We have condo level soundproofing to make things a little bit more comfortable, in addition to um, additional accessibility features in 25% of the units, but also, as Karen mentioned, the entire building is accessible to people who have mobility challenges. So the indoor activities, I mean, I won't go through all of them, but again, the key to get people out of their apartments, fosters and promotes inclusivity and understanding. We have a lot of folks who previously to moving in the building had absolutely no interaction with people with intellectual or developmental disabilities or autism. And I had a couple of them say to me, well, at first I thought it was kind of strange. And after a while, it's just the way the building is. It's normal. And so it was nice to see a progression in people's willingness to interact, be comfortable, and engage with one another. We've got all kinds of events, everything from bingo to music nights, holiday meals, catered dinners. We have an annual first responder event because we think it's really important to engage all of our first responders so they know who lives in the building, they know what some of the mobility and other challenges are, so that hopefully the first time they don't have an interaction with somebody, isn't in a emergency situations. We also try to focus on health and wellness. And so we've partnered with Edgewood College nursing students, with the ADRC, with Greene County Public Health, and we try to do things that really focus on health and well-being, including healthy eating demonstrations, blood pressure checks, vaccine clinics, that kind of thing. And I've just got kind of a series of photos. This was one of our more recent events. We have a little coffee hut in New Glarus called True Isle, and they also have a trailer. So we invite that trailer out a couple times a year. We pay for everybody in the building to get a free coffee or smoothie drink of their choice, and they get to enjoy that and socialize with one another. And this was a huge hit in the building. That's one of our community spaces. This is actually bingo night. And so I I never in a million years thought my daughter would be into bingo. She does live in the apartments, and it's her favorite event probably because of all the fabulous prizes. And so we do things like pay for those prizes, and then volunteers come in and run the event. Just to and lots food brings people to your events. I'll just say that. So anytime we have food, we have higher attendance. And so this was one of our healthy eating events. And this was our first responder night. And so we've got some of our EMS. You can see some of the sheriffs and police officers in the background and enjoying a nice catered dinner once a year. And we do that in September. And that's River, our visiting therapy dog. It's been wonderful because we've had lots of people reach out to us. And just as many that as we reach out to, and then they say, hey, we want to be part of this. And so we get River and his handler at no charge, which is awesome. And there's one of our talented musicians who did a Taylor Swift cover night, happens to also be a tenant in the building and happens to also be a service provider for one of our disabled individuals. We try to harness volunteers where we can. And one of our relationships is with the New Glarus School District. And so these are National Honor Society students who we regularly call on to help put up Christmas trees, decorate, serve at events involving food in some of our bigger events. And here's our last year's Edgewood College nursing student, and here she is doing a blood pressure check with Ashley. I'm just going to do a shout out. The young gal in the white t-shirt happens to be my daughter Amy, and swings are super important to her. We're glad we were able to provide those spaces for the people who need them. Service provision. This deserves way more than one slide, but it's what I have time to cover. But in case you're wondering, how does this work in practicality? So basically, each individual in the building who requires support is either enrolled in the long-term care system through IRIS, which is self-directed, or family care, and which is not self-directed, where you're given a menu of options to choose from. Our family chose the self-directed route, as did most of the families that I'm familiar with in the building, which means that we got to choose our own service provider. We got to choose our own transportation provider. We chose Mark as opposed to another place where Amy could get her supportive employment and vocational services. So you choose one of those two systems in the state, but the money that is actually used to pay the providers who provide the one-on-one support for people like my daughter Amy, it starts up at the federal level with Medicaid dollars, then flows through the Department of Health Services, then through the IRIS and family care programs, and then ultimately to the actual companies or professionals that provide the service provision. The budgets are developed annually. They get tweaked annually, sometimes more frequently. And those budgets can include other things like transportation, like Mark, like the one-on-one support, whether that's 24/7 or whether it's 3 hours a day or whatever it might be. And then other families that use IRIS rather than hiring a support provider agency hire people directly on their own, but using those IRIS dollars. There is a cap on what those folks can be paid per hour. And so that is one limitation, but some folks in the building have chosen that route. The need, as you can imagine, and as Karen said, is great. And that's kind of illustrative by the number of calls and emails we get, regularly being contacted by grassroots groups across the country who want to create similar, inclusive, affordable rental communities. And I think it's especially severe for people with autism, but not exclusively, because those folks are starting to age into the post-school system. And projects are springing up all over the state. Some of them are like Prairie House, like there's a project in La Crosse that's currently under construction. We worked with that group. That's going to be a 60-unit apartment building. And there are other groups where they are as different as the family-led groups that joined to create them. And so everybody's kind of got their own little take on it. And some of the projects look very different from others, but I'm excited that they're starting to spring up with an emphasis on the intellectual developmental disability and autism population. And so I'm happy to see that. Just a flag we have flying outside the building. And there's our information. I encourage you to follow us on Facebook and check out our activities and what we're up to. And I'm happy to take questions as well.
I wonder about the same questions I had before too, about wait lists and like how long and when's a good time to start signing up for the programs, or if you're interested.
Well, it depends on what kind of apartment you want, because there's 10 like completely wheelchair accessible units with roll-in showers with the lower countertops. So if you want that type of unit, I would say I would be doing that as soon as your son or daughter is age 18, because those apartments turn over less frequently as opposed to the units that don't have those lower countertops and the roll-in showers. It's hard for me to say exactly what the waiting list is. You know, we don't do the property management end of things, but I know that the list is longer than the number of units. And so it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be longer. What I would encourage parents to do though is don't wait too long. One reason being is, you know, mom and dad can't do this forever. You know, it's hard to bend and lift and all the things that you have to do. And I think the worst case scenario is to wait until you have some kind of health or other emergency that requires your son or daughter to be placed, as opposed to you as a parent being able to be the one to be proactive and saying, this is the environment we think is appropriate, and to plan rather than to react, I guess.
There's a question in the chat. Are all the units for single tenants, or could there be roommates?
I think there could be, well, we do have some roommates. We have one 2-bedroom unit that has 2 young ladies, both of whom attend Mark, who had wanted to be roommates from the beginning. That is the one I'm aware of. We did have a set of siblings that were roommates, and they discovered that even though they grew up living together, they did not enjoy living together in this environment. So they both now have their own apartment. But yes, I think it is possible, for sure.
I've forgotten to let people know who, if you are not familiar with Mark, they have a number of different locations around the Madison area. And so I just wanted to put in a link to them if you wanted to learn a little bit more about them as well.
And I just have to do the shout out. Tomorrow
Yes.
night, there's an open house for the brand new, fantastic community hub that Mark will literally just welcomed folks into yesterday. So if you have an interest in seeing the new Mark, come tomorrow night between 4 and 6. There will be refreshments. So,
That's it, the one in Mount Horeb.
yep. It's very near Miller's grocery store. I unfortunately don't remember the street name, but
I'm gonna say that it's on 1961 Commerce Drive.
that sounds exactly correct.
I don't know. Thank you, Google. I can't find anything that I could give you, but that's their Instagram account. So that's what Instagram has to say. of which I am not on because I'm just horribly old. I don't know how the Instagram face thing works. Um, Other questions, comments? I have a couple more things that I can just general things that I can add to the conversation to help out. If that's you don't have much of a choice, do you? You can leave, but I'm still going to be talking. Um, so I mentioned that I had been able to attend a housing um, seminar last night. It's a three-part put on by the Pacer Center, which is out of Minnesota, but they do things nationwide. So some of the information was strictly very much Minnesotaized, which you will notice, unfortunately, as you go from state to state, they changed the names of, like, you won't find Iris somewhere else or family care somewhere else, but there'll be programs like them. They'll just be called something different. So I had to get over this language barrier with my friends in Minnesota, but I did okay with them. But one of the things that they talked about was the need, and I'm sure Karen and Marianne, you would be able to speak to this too, the need to start off as you're thinking about housing as a very person-centered planning progress. What is it the person is looking for? Do they like outdoors? Do they like indoors? Do they like to be around a lot of people? Do they like to be around very few people? What sort of accommodations might they need? Do they want rural? Do they want city? Along with the reminder that pretty much everybody in life doesn't always get everything they want, and that housing is a great opportunity to teach compromise. I may not get what I want, but do I get enough of what I need and what is going to keep me moving forward? And so starting the housing process, very person-centered base. And then that also goes into the person-centered planning process of how is this person going to be able to afford a place? Do they have options to get Section 8 or that 811, or are they on long-term care? Are they receiving Social Security income? So they have an income that can be their income, that then a 30% or 50% or whatever the program may be charges their income. If they don't have any income, then it might be a little bit harder. So their personal financial situation. And then once the legalities of that financial situation, that income, do they then have other outside sources like an ABLE account or a trust that's going to be able to help them have fun and not just sit in their house, because that is not healthy for any of us. And so part of the person-centered planning includes looking at how is this going to be affordable for this person? Who is their circle of support that is going to be with them as they decide to move out? Other options that we've seen through talking to families is families that have bought a duplex and rented out half and had their child or child and friends in the other half. And so try to make that self-sustaining. People have moved in with family, friends, or relatives, maybe in like a grandmother suite. If your locality has it, maybe in a tiny house in the backyard. If Stoughton allowed it, my son would love to live in a tiny house in our backyard as long as he still had access to all of his stuff in the basement. But he wouldn't mind getting separated every so often from us. We talked about apartment rental. There's also community residential settings. And so this is when you get into the almost institutional or institutional type settings of adult family homes, what used to be called group homes. They're trying to move away from the term group homes, but where many people with disabilities are living together, and usually with 24-hour care, but not always. Some are higher level of care. So there's some people that need 24/7 nursing. And so that's going to be an institutional type level of care. And so those are options throughout Wisconsin as well. Some of them are called the intermediate care facilities. Cooperative housing is out there. Co-housing is out there. Parents have started to come up with some very creative ways of trying to help their kiddos be happy in their home. And that's one of the things that they really emphasized last night as well, is that it's not just housing. It's a place that that person feels is their home. And if we look at that as the first question in the person-centered planning process, right now, my son's 27. He considers this right now to be his home. He's very happy in the basement. It's meeting his needs. We talked to him, do you want to move out sometime? He's like, maybe, maybe not. And I'm going to encourage him to do what he wants to do. We have some planning to do in that in the future because I continue to get older instead of younger. But those are just some of the thoughts. And as we hopefully have some more discussion or questions and answers, I'll put in some more information that I learned last night, some of the centers from the Pacer Center. But again, remember, it's in Minnesota. Not all the words are the same as what we use in Wisconsin. So please unmute questions, talk amongst yourselves. Marianne, Karen, anything from what you've learned from person-centered planning and how we could go about helping our youth to find their home, wherever that setting may look like.
I would echo very much what Marianne said about don't wait. Start the process as soon as you can. It often takes longer than you think to find a place and to make sure that it's going to be the right place. So I encourage everybody to start looking and thinking about what those options might be. And I will say, I know that, we talked about rental versus purchase, but we've been able to help some fairly young clients be able to buy a home. We just closed a project for a 22-year-old who just purchased his first home. That one was a squeaker. We barely got that one done, but we were able to get him in right before Christmas. So he was able to celebrate Christmas in his own home for the first time. So again, think early about what the sort of best case scenario might be and what the options might be, and anticipate that it will take some time to identify the right place.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything else to add other than I always think of that center, that the folks that we represented, my own daughter in the case of our family that's the North Star. And you always have to look at that at that North Star and what are the particular needs, preferences of the individual themselves and let that guide how you approach things.
Do either of you have any experience with the best way to network for a caregiver if your individual does need some help in the home or the apartment? Big question.
That is a big question.
That is a big question. That's not a role we typically take on. Usually people come to us already having identified a caregiver who is part of the process of finding the right home. But I would say that, with the community that the people that we work with come from are often sharing resources and information, and it's sort of an informal network of communication that they're as they are working to find the right situation for their children, they're talking with other people and learning about what those options are. I'd say that anytime you can ask questions. I know there's been a couple of fabulous resource fairs in the Madison area. There was the Disability Pride Fair this past summer, where there are it's tables with people with information about their programs, but mostly it's people walking around talking to each other and getting insight and perspective on the different options. So if you can attend one of those, I think that can be a great way to start.
I think one of the experience that we had too is that particularly if you do find a provider that treats its employees well, pays them well, gives them vacation days, PTO, before you know it, those employees are talking to their friends. And that's probably our number one way that the main service provider that provides services for folks at Prairie House has wound up recruiting its employees. And conversely, if you don't pay your employees well and you don't treat them well, that word gets around fast too.
And it is a very tight market
Mhm.
for personal care and supportive care workers right now. I see that you also had a question about a resource that lists housing units. There's like different places that are in charge of different things. Okay, so our families that I work with will talk to their Aging and Disability Resource Center to try to find out what's available in the county. We've also had families that have had success talking to their regional independent living center, which are run by and for people with disabilities, and so they usually have a pretty good pulse on there. And then the Department of Health Services is the one that sort of oversees the institutional type or regulated homes, where they have to go through licensing and regulation, and they have um, spot checks and people checking in on them, and there's a little bit more rigidity to them. But for some people, that's a very good option for them. And so it's a matter of digging in and finding out what's out there. But as everybody has already said, there's more people than there are options right now, which is why families keep getting creative.
Yeah, one resource that I'm aware of, and even though it's called the Autism Housing Network, their resource guide is not specific to autism, and it's a nationwide database, and it shows you what projects are in development, and which ones already exist, and kind of what their bent or their focus or their emphasis is. And I have found that to be a helpful resource.
I have now officially learned 5 new things tonight. So thank you for that, Marianne. Other questions, comments, things that you might like to discuss in the last 4 to 5 minutes that we have? I know we don't have, this is definitely one of those questions that there's no one answer to, and sometimes there's not really a great answer either, but there are these different things that are going on. But starting with that person, what are their needs? What are their options? How's it going to get paid for? Are usually the starting questions. And I just love, I'm so excited that I got here for moving out and who in one thing. I'm just so you know, I'm excited. Other questions, comments before we close our note?
Hey, Mark, all the things that you've sent out in the chat, or Tim, I'm sorry.
Fine.
Are we able to get an email or something with all the?
Yes. Thank you so much for that. Yes. So when we are done, with Marianne's permission, I'll send that PowerPoint out. Along with, I'll be putting together a resource sheet that Mount Horeb folks can also let me know what contacts they would like for to localize with Mount Horeb. But everything that's in the chat, and anything that Karen or Marianne send to me in the next couple of days, will be put onto a resource sheet, and that'll be posted along with the video, but it'll also get sent out to you because you registered.
Great, thanks.
Yep. So I should have said that at the beginning, would have saved your carpal tunnel. My apologies. All right. Well, thank you. So this was very exciting. We've been doing Transition Talks Tuesdays 3 years. We have not had this discussion before. So thank you very much for being here, starting this discussion. And I hope that it's going to help you, your families, your loved ones, and people throughout Wisconsin. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you.